Yeah. Okay, amazing. Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone on Zoom.
Tell them if they come, they can get coffee.
If you come in person, you can get coffee. And you see, but not Matan's coffee. And you can see my smile close up. We welcome you to come in. I'm actually supposed to be looking at here when I talk to you. Okay. For the people who just walked in, we're getting more copies of the handout in just a minute. Okay. Okay. And while we are just waiting for the copies, there's this fabulous evening coming up next Sunday, November the 17th. There's flyers all around. Oh, you've all got flyers, right? I should have sent you flyers. Okay, so today we are starting with our first sort of case study. As I presented last week, we gave an introduction to the course, and then I explained that every week we take a different halachic question, a different issue, a different situation that will arrive, and we try and grapple with the halachic principles behind it and try and reach a conclusion. For anyone who just walked in, they're bringing more sheets. Hopefully they will bring five. 5 people have walked in since I sent them. Okay. תודה רבה. כמה עשית? 6. לא, 6 זה בסדר. Okay, תודה. Okay, just hands up who hasn't got one, and then everyone will pass them around to you. Thank you. Here, I don't. Oh, someone is in the
That's my seat over there.
do you want? No, don't sit behind. Do you want to seat yourself somewhere on the corner?
I want to be able to see. Yeah.
Oh, we might need more copies then, actually. Otherwise you'll feel.
Can everybody else on Zoom hear you? Because I can't hear anything.
No, I can't hear either.
So what is it?
No, but you're the guest. You're the guest. You're
Ah.
staying at someone, so you're not cooking. And they cook
Zoom doesn't hear anything.
Rashawn because they only have one.
Zoom doesn't hear anything.
So
The host should be thinking of that. I mean,
no. Correct. The host is going to be aware, but that's not the answer to the question. The host decided I was rushed, I was working, I prepared Yom Tov the day before. I made enough for Yom Tov. When it gets to Yom Tov Sheni, it's Friday for me. So I'm going to cook. Friday I can cook. So then the question is, can I eat the food that this Israeli cooked on Friday, but it's my Yom Tov Sheni? And more so, can I ask them? I fancy an omelette.
You can cook on Yom Tov. I don't understand the question.
Okay, so good, lovely. So give me another malacha, okay? Sorry, you're absolutely right. We'll keep away from cooking. You're absolutely right. I just wanted a practical example. Ask them to turn on the light, ask them to turn off the AC, ask them to turn on the AC. Sorry.
you can turn on the stove on a normal day, which
Correct. But he's right. I can bring in an example that you're going to say to me, well, as long as they left the stove on, okay. But if they say to you, can I have an omelette when the stove is off, which requires you turning on the stove? Think of either scenario, either a different malacha, let's keep away from cooking, or obviously cooking that requires turning on the oven, turning on the stove, okay? But AC, lights, think of anything else that might be. Elevator.
It's not
Okay, so you find it quite simple. I can ask the Israeli to do something because it's not hard for them. Correct. So it doesn't bother you.
If only that they took upon themselves to keep a second day, because I don't know why.
Okay, so the reason will be really important. The reason will be really important. So we're coming to that, but I like your way of analyzing it. Okay, can you hear me on Zoom now, by the way? Because I think they just fixed it. Oh, good, thank you. Okay.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, good, amazing.
Oh, and I thought it was my computer gone wrong.
No.
The other difference.
Fine. Okay.
It's a deoraita of, we don't wanna have a goy do all these things for us on Shabbat, whatever the reason, because you get used to it, because you convert your Shabbat into, but first, and second of all, Yom Tov Sheni is Drabanan, and Yom Tov Sheni is doubtful to begin with, whether you need to keep it, and it depends who you ask.
Okay, lovely. So coming back to your point about, well, I see it as a similar situation as asking a non-Jew to do something on Shabbat. And I know that's not allowed. We will look at that in more detail, not one of the tangents we're going to go down. But you mentioned there, but maybe if we need something done by the non-Jew, we say it covertly, or we say it in a sort of hinting form, then it becomes okay, as opposed to saying it explicitly, it doesn't. We are now saying we may not need to go down that line at all because it's a totally different situation. The idea of not asking a non-Jew to do a melacha on Shabbos has its own reasons. You threw out one of them, perhaps. It means that you may then get used to this idea of melacha being done, whether it's the speaking itself about the melacha that's the problem, or whether it means it might lead you to do it yourself another time, etc., etc. A lot of the reasons behind asking a non-Jew or not asking a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbat are not necessarily going to be relevant in our scenario of asking your Israeli host to do something for you on their chol when it's your Yom Tov Sheni. You're also right about other differences as well. We're coming to that. Again, what is the status, the standing of Yom Tov Sheni for this diaspora Jew? Okay, that's going to be really important. So we've sort of got ourselves thinking about the issues. I want to begin with a Gemara, which discusses a different scenario from where we can draw the principle of maybe ask somebody else to do a melacha for us when it's permissible for them, but prohibited for us, okay? So the Gemara is talking, I brought a very, very short extract here. The Gemara is talking about a Jew who owns a field, and he wants somebody to be watching over his field on Shabbat. And he lives too far from the field that he can go over there on Shabbat to watch over it himself, okay? It is outside the tchum, we've discussed this before, again, just briefly, a certain distance that you may not go beyond on Shabbat. So he lives too far, he can't go himself. The question is, my friend lives really near that area, so it's within his tchum. So he's totally permitted on Shabbat to walk around the corner to my field and keep an eye on it for me. Can I ask him to do so for me?
That's good.
So I'm asking, no, he's just literally standing there keeping an eye on. No, not
What's
that
the point if he doesn't do anything? Let's say he sees.
No, he is a presence there. He's a presence there. So may I ask him to do something? Again, in this case, it's very important that we understand clearly. It's permissible for him to do it. The friend lives close enough that it would be totally permissible for him to go and guard the field. For me, it's prohibited. So may I ask him to do so? So in Masechet Shabbat, we read, I'm in source 1, Mutar la'adam lomar lachavero shmor li perot shebitchumcha. Please look after my fruit that are within your tchum. And you know what? In return, I'm going to look after your fruit in the field that are around the corner from me. That point is really irrelevant too. We can see you are allowed to ask him. Again, you are allowed to ask somebody to do something because it's permissible for him. So far, so good. Even though it's prohibited for you.
The only reason it's prohibited for him was because he was out of the area.
Yes. Correct.
That's why he's allowed to do for his friend.
Correct. It's sort of a practical difference. Okay, lovely. I'm pleased you sort of emphasize that. It's prohibited for me. It happens to be prohibited for me, and it happens to be permissible for him. And you are allowed to ask him, says the Gemara, to do it for you. Okay. Now the Rashba, who I did bring, and the Ram, who I haven't brought on here, debate the reason why. They debate the reason why you're allowed to do something, why you're allowed to ask someone to do something for you when it's prohibited for you, even though it's permissible for them. Okay. So the Ram says you're allowed to do so because you really could have worked out a situation where it would be permissible for you as well. Okay, again, not trying to get lost in the details, but when you have a tchum, if you close the distance by sort of having a little hut or a little stop-off point with a bit of food and water, whatever the details are, you have a hut every so often, however many meters along, you will have closed the gap, basically. It is now not outside your tchum. With a little bit of forward planning, as often in life, you could have resolved the situation that it would be permissible for you as well. So the Ran said, given that it's permissible for him entirely, and it's prohibited for you, but it could have been permissible for you, you're allowed to ask him to do this guarding for you. His focus is on the fact that you could have been permitted to do so as well. Okay, the Rashba comes with a totally different reason. The Rashba will read inside, and he says, I'm in source 2, even though this guy who's the owner of the field far away isn't allowed to go there, but since it's permissible for his friend to guard, so there's no problem in asking him to do so because it's permissible. So far, I'm just stopping there for a moment. So far, we've seen that the Ran focuses on the possibility of it being permissible for you as well. The Rashba just focuses on the fact that it's fine for him. It's 100% fine for him, so you can ask him to do so. Hence, we derive the principle, you can ask someone to do something that's permissible for them, even when it's prohibited for you. He then goes on to try and apply it to another case. Do you remember I said at the beginning, we're going to see cases and try and compare them or contrast them and finally come back to our question and say what is most similar or which of the principles that we've learned can we apply. So immediately the Rashba quotes the Tosfot, I'm coming back, and who says, V'katvu b'Tosfot, and they said, D'maha sham'inan, we learn from this principle something else. The Yisrael shekibel alav Shabbat kodem shechashecha, a Jew who accepted Shabbat early one week. Mutar lomar liYisrael chavero la'asot lo melacha plonit. He is permitted to ask his friend, the other Jew, who has not yet accepted Shabbat, to do some melacha for him. Because it's going to be totally permissible for the person who's going to do the melacha. That's it. I was just about to say, so I'm going to paint the scenario, but this is an easy one. Okay, so you have, let's say, especially in the summer, Shabbat is coming in at 7 o'clock. Okay, but we always go to the early minyan. So I'm lighting at 6 something. I have forgotten something very important. So at 6:35, I go out to the street and I say, have you brought in Shabbos? No, fine. Can you come and do such and such melacha for me?
And you can say it to me.
This, and you can, and we're talking only directly. We're talking only directly. Another day, another show, we might talk about the hinting. We really are talking only directly here. So therefore, one second. So therefore, what we saw was from the Gemara, the Rashba gave an explanation. He gave an explanation which was quite simply, it's permissible for this friend, so go ahead and ask him to do it. And he also, in the name of Tosfot, brought it, compared it, sort of paralleled it to the case of early Shabbat. A Jew who has already brought in Shabbat may ask a Jew who hasn't yet brought in Shabbat to do a melacha for them. Same principle. It's totally permitted for them, so feel free to go ahead and ask them to do it.
Does that include also a lift? If you've already changed, can you ask somebody else if they can press the lift so that you can go down?
Yes, why not? Why not? You have brought in you have brought in Shabbat, then you want to go down in the lift, you want to go down in the elevator, you ask someone to press it for you who hasn't yet brought in Shabbat. I'm just going to caveat here, obviously everyone remember, fully before the time of Shabbat, okay? But in the summer, that can be a really, really long time. In the winter, much less likely. You also had a question, yeah?
Like when the areas came in London, people would say, well, I don't carry, but you carry this.
Okay, fabulous. You're bringing up lovely comparisons. The case that Promet is bringing up is if somebody, remember, it was very, very new for us, okay? So it was like new news. Okay, there was an Eruv set up in London. It was not unanimously accepted. So there were those who followed, well, I think in Israel it is, no? It was, no, right, something I didn't know, okay. So there are people who are following Rabbanim and the Beit Din who fully endorse the Eruv, and there are people who are not following Rabbanim who do not accept the Eruv. So then she brings up the case, well, can one group ask the other group to carry for them? Can you show me, again, without me getting sucked into this, can you show me the difference between that case and the cases we've been discussing?
They took upon themselves not to hold by the Arab, so it's like, they can't ask someone else to do what they themselves can't do for themselves.
Why?
And not only that, it's not a separate thing, they're in the same area.
No, agreed that the case is different from the case of the Gemara, but in terms of principles,
They didn't take it themselves to hold the Arab.
okay,
So they can't say if it's
in their eyes,
that, and I have someone else like.
okay, and
Yeah, they don't think it's okay.
they don't think it's okay? Very clearly put, they don't think it's okay. On Shabbat, I have no problem. I have no problem that you haven't brought in Shabbat yet. I just think the moment I'm ready, I'm lighting candles because this serenity just descends upon the house. So the earlier I do it, the better. I don't in any way think that the person who hasn't yet brought in Shabbat is doing anything wrong. In the mind of the person who doesn't carry, or it doesn't matter, in the view of their rabbi, let's say, okay, that Eruv isn't valid, so everybody else is doing something wrong, okay? So therefore, that is a different scenario. We actually are going to come, who else? We actually are going to bring up a case that is more similar to that as we go through, okay? But for the moment, that's a different scenario. It doesn't help us with where we are now.
When the Arab went up in Johannesburg in South Africa, in Chabad situations, Chabad people specifically, the men don't hold by the Arab, but their wives do. And that was accepted for their Christian friends, so they can put.
Oh, that's interesting.
There goes in the.
Under there. Okay, no, that is very interesting. Again, as I said, when I bring up the scenario that's more comparable to that, so we'll get to it. Okay, we'll get to it. It's interesting, but it's very different, and therefore it's slightly bringing us in another direction, but it's important. Okay, we will see.
I'm holier than thou situation.
Okay, but don't worry about the holier than thou for the moment. I mean, it very often is, okay, but I'm just saying, don't worry about that for the moment, because let's say this was the way you functioned in your Jewish life. I appreciate it might not be, but let's say there was really only one person who, if you had any questions, that was always your go-to. If that person who you always follow has now come out on a sticky issue, like the Eruv in London, and said it's not okay, then it would be difficult, uncomfortable, whatever the word is, for you to say, well, I'm not following him now. Okay, I'm not going into whether it would be forbidden to do so, but you understand. Okay, so it's not necessarily holier than thou. If somebody does really function like that, they really have one go-to person, sometimes you just got to follow them, even, on the bad days. Okay, so we have presented the sugya, we have seen the debate between the Ran and the Rashba, and very importantly, we've seen how the Rashba then brought up a parallel scenario and applied the same principle there. Let's just see it inside. In source 3, we see how the Shulchan Aruch rules on that issue of the person who's brought in Shabbat early, turns to the Jew next to them who hasn't yet brought in Shabbat, and asks them to do a malacha. Let's see him rule, as we have read. Source 3. Yesh omrim shemi shekibel alav Shabbat kodem shechashecha mutar lomar liYisrael chavero la'asot lemelacha. There are those who say that if someone has already brought in Shabbat early, he can turn to a Jew who hasn't yet brought in Shabbat and ask him to do melacha for him. The Ramah now adds, just interesting, we're carrying on in source 3, umutar le'anot me'ota melacha b'Shabbat, and you can benefit from that melacha on Shabbat. he's just sort of drumming the point home, because Shekem b'Motzei Shabbat, and obviously even more so on Motzei Shabbat, after Shabbat, you can benefit from whatever this Jew did before he brought in Shabbat. Umi shema'acher le'itpalel b'Motzei Shabbat, and sort of the equal and opposite situation at the end of Shabbat. If you're late, and for whatever reason you haven't yet gone to daven Mariv on Motzei Shabbat, or said Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh L'chol, for whatever reason, perhaps because you're in the middle of your meal, short Shabbat, you started a bit late, you are still enjoying your meal, so you're in the middle of the meal, you haven't benched yet, let's say with Ritzei, so you haven't brought out Shabbat for whatever reason. Likewise, you can ask the other Jew who has gone to shul and has done Mariv and has done Havdalah, to do any form of melacha for him, and you, while it's still Shabbos for you, can benefit from the melacha done from Jew, neighbor, whoever he is, that he did after Shabbat, or wife who just said Baruch HaMavdil. Okay, so that's sort of a parallel scenario. Again, we can ask the question, so who has the Shulchan Aruch ruled like? Did he follow the logic of the Ran, that the guiding principle is, well, you could have been in a position where it was permissible for you as well? Or does he follow the view of the Rashba, whose guiding principle was, if something's 100% permissible for someone else, go ahead and ask him to do so?
Does that mean?
Yes, interesting. I haven't extracted it here. There's not, this is not like part of it. It is interesting language.
Yeah.
He doesn't bring the other opinion, but he allows you to understand not everyone agrees. Yes, but absolutely this is how he rules. Yeah. It is interesting language. So both for Sephardim and Ashkenazim, because both the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, they rule like this. Who are they ruling like? We'll read it inside, but we can see he's following the opinion of the Rashba. He's following the opinion of they are both the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah are following the opinion of the Rashba, that the guiding principle is, if it's permissible for someone else, so go ahead and ask them. Why do I say that? Could you explain it the other way? It looks like you can.
Well,
The Ran's guiding principle was, you could have made these huts, you could have, closed off the tchum, so it could have been permissible for you as well. So that's why it's allowed. Can you apply that to the case of early Shabbat?
Shabbat early, it's up to you. You can
Absolutely.
Shabbat when everybody else does.
Absolutely. We also could argue, you could have just not brought in Shabbat, you could have just waited. So in this scenario, it just as easily could have been permissible for you to be doing melacha at this time, half an hour before Shabbat, as for the other person. Can you say it on Motzei Shabbat? You could have just finished your meal. Okay, I agree. I mean, there can be certain scenarios, but it's more of a practical impossibility than anything else. Okay, so interestingly, that the Taz believes that the Shulchan Aruch has followed the Rashba, and he's sort of running with that. Jump to source 5. We're just going to read the first part for the moment. So he's commenting on the Shulchan Aruch about early Shabbat. לפי זה, שפר ילד הרשב"א כשם שכאן בפירות תחומך אין אנו צריכים להיתר בורגנין, אלא מותר בכוח דאין כאן איסור לגמרי. So he says, it follows, the logic of the Rashba, who said, when you're talking about the fruit in that field that was far away, you don't need to say, but in this scenario, you could have put little huts along the way and you could have closed off the tchum, so then it would have been permissible for you as well. We just say this person is totally allowed to do the action, so you can ask them to do so. Carrying on, kevan shelachavero mutar, because it's permissible for his friend. Ve'en alav isur Shabbat. He's not breaking Shabbat in any way whatsoever. Al-kain mutar lazeh ha'amira sheyishmar perotav. Therefore, you can say to him, please, can you look after my fruit? Why is it not a problem? And also similarly with our case right now, the person who brought in Shabbat early can ask his friend to do a melacha. En alav isur amira lechavera, and there is no problem of saying something to your friend. Fremet brought up the issue before of, is it to do with the idea of saying something to a non-Jew on Shabbat, but we don't, again, topic for another shir, but we don't, let's say, normal circumstances, no one's dying, we don't explicitly say to a non-Jew to do a melacha for us specifically, absolutely not. So why is it allowed here to ask the Jew to do something that we aren't allowed to do at this moment in time? Zelo ne'esar amira ela b'davar shehu shaveh lechal adam miYisrael. There's no problem with saying, asking, giving a command or asking a request from someone to do something that's forbidden for you, unless it is something shehu shaveh lechal adam miYisrael, unless it is something that's equally applied to all Jews. The fruit in that field is not equally applied to all Jews. Forbidden for some, if they're far away, totally permissible for the other who's round the corner and he can just go round the corner and keep a good eye on the field. Erev Shabbat, in the Tosefet Shabbat period of time, when I've already brought in Shabbat, the melachot that I am now not allowed to do are not equally applicable to all Jews. There's many, many Jews out there who are waiting to the last moment, plus a couple of minutes here or there, and they have not yet brought in Shabbat, and they're totally permitted to do these melachot. So therefore, you absolutely may ask them to do so. Okay, let's leave it there. So the Taz has begun by showing us how he sees the Shulchan Aruch as following the Rashba, and in both cases it's based on the same principle of if something's permissible for someone else, go ahead and ask them. And he's established for us something very important to remember, what I underlined. You can ask someone to do something if this is not a forbidden action on everyone. Erev Shabbat, good example. Field out of my tchum, good example. Okay. However, we have a case that is possibly going to muddy the waters and is possibly similar to what you picked up. And that case is the following. The Torah spoke about certain Hasidim and certain people who took upon themselves to keep 2 days Yom Kippur.
That's
They
logical. No, not really, because.
I love it. This is great. Absolutely.
If it goes at Sukkot and what, and you have to.
Absolutely. If we have a Sveka de Yoma on every Chag, that we in the diaspora are unsure of what day is Yom Tov, and we always therefore keep 2 days Yom Tov, then it follows that just like Rosh Hashanah, which is different, and Sukkot and Pesach, we will keep 2 days Yom Kippur. And indeed, this is what some people did. When you keep 2 days Yom Kippur, you fast 2 full days in a row, no like meal in the middle, because there's no time in the middle of a day and a day, right? And therefore, you have to fast 2 full days in a row, which, by the way, the reason why it's illogical and Yom Kippur is the exception is really there are other reasons. We are also coming to them in this share and also a topic for another share, but it's also perhaps based on it is extremely difficult to fast for 2 days. So that already puts it in a different category. You can if you get to the end of this year and see. You have to get to the end of the share. So
Can't have 2 days Shabbat, 2 consecutive days Shabbat. No.
what do you mean?
You can't have like Yom Kippur will never fall on a Friday or a Sunday ever.
Okay.
Because you can't have 2 days Shabbat.
Okay, lovely. But what you can have, you're absolutely correct. But it can fall on Thursday.
Yes.
So if you were one of these very special people who kept 2 days Yom Kippur, you would do Thursday and Friday. And here is where the question arises. Thursday, Friday, you haven't eaten. Shabbat comes in, immediately Yom Kippur is finished. Where is your food? Now, don't tell me you made it on Wednesday. That's not the answer, right? So that would be too simple. So, and also in the times of the Torah, they didn't have fridges. I don't know if they could have done it so far in advance. Okay. So what they did was, and obviously on Yom Kippur, you cannot cook. Okay. It's not like Yom Tov. Okay. We're stuck. Where is your food? Absolutely, absolutely. So again, I just want to talk about it outside, but we're going to see inside. If you keep 2 days Yom Kippur, you have to keep each one as seriously as the other. Not the first day is real and the second day is not, or vice versa. If there were enough of them who were doing this is the special Hasidim, whatever, and there was a minion, they absolutely had their minion. Okay. So, okay, don't know what they did about shofar at the end. That's not my main concern about their Yom Kippur. Exactly. No, good question. So they have to have food on Shabbat. So the question arises, can they ask Jew number 2 of the majority of Jews who isn't keeping 2 days Yom Kippur on Friday, when it's just Friday for him, to cook for Shabbat? What do you think?
Yes.
Lots of yeses.
Yeah.
Why no?
Because he's taking on the second day as a Yom Tov, so if he's not allowed, then nobody else is allowed.
But they are cooking. They think they're allowed, and they are cooking Shabbos for themselves. It's like the Eruv. It absolutely is like the Eruv. So our knee-jerk reaction is to say, yes, you let me ask your friend to look after the fruit in the field. You let me ask the friend on Erev Shabbat when he hasn't brought in Shabbat. This should also be a yes. But we're going to see it's a no, and we're going to try and explain why it's a no. We're going to distinguish between the cases. So let's first read in the Torah. I'm in source 4. So the Torah says, "V'chasidim v'anshei ma'aseh ba'Ashkenaz regilim le'asot bet yamim Yom Kippurim." There were certain groups of people who used to do 2 days Yom Kippur. Shemitanyen bet yamim. They would fast for these 2 days, etc., etc. V'adoni avi Rosh haya moche biyadam. Actually, my father, the Rosh, says the Torah, he would really dissuade them from doing so because of the great difficulty of fasting 2 days in a row. Aval lish'ar kol davar ve'isur melacha noagin kumo b'rishon. You know, you have to know that if you are keeping 2 days Yom Tov, for everything, for Isser Melacha, for all of the Inuyim, not fasting and not anointing, putting ointments on, etc., all of these things, you have to treat both days equally, like as seriously as each other. The second day as serious as the first day. Helkach. Afilu achirim lo yuvashlu lo. And then he adds on the point, which is what we want to deal with. And others cannot be asked to cook for you. Let's just clarify, by the way, reading between the lines, if somebody's cooking for Shabbat for themselves anyway, then you turn up on Shabbat and you say, can I join in the meal? It's not a problem to benefit from the food that they cooked on Friday, which was your Yom Kippur, because they were not cooking for you. They didn't have you in mind. They didn't know you were about to knock on the door 10 minutes ago. But if you ask them, you are not allowed to ask the Jew to cook.
1 day.
Absolutely. You're not allowed to ask them to cook for you. And if you didn't ask them, neither before nor today, but they know the situation you're in, so they are cooking specifically for you, equally a problem. Okay, it's the specific melacha done for you that's also a problem. Okay.
When was this done? 2 days Yom Kippur?
Clearly, some people were doing it at the time of the Torah. He is about 1300s, about 1300s.
The dark ages.
I don't know if anyone. Although, does everyone remember our international dateline sheet? Whoever was here, the people who weren't here don't have to remember. The people who were here do. Do you remember the shiurim we did about the international dateline and in Kobe, and they had Kobe, Japan, and they had the question as to what day was Yom Kippur? Okay, so really, besides for that famous example, it has definitely died out through the ages. But again, so our question is here, why is this not allowed, whereas our 2 cases that we have brought so far is allowed? I am not going to read inside, having an eye on the time, but the Taz talks about the fact that there is a difference between the 2 cases. Quite clearly, we're starting to feel the difference. If this person is keeping 2 days Yom Kippur, he is doing so because of Sveka de Yoma. He is unsure which day is Yom Kippur. It might be Thursday, but it might be Friday. That's why he has to keep them both really equally, seriously, fully. It might be Thursday, it might be Friday, so I'm going to cover my bases and keep both of them. Therefore, in his eyes, in his halachic eyes, the day of Friday is Yom Kippur. Nobody should be cooking on Friday. It might be Yom Kippur. So therefore, he cannot ask somebody to cook for him on their Friday, not Yom Kippur. This is different from Erev Shabbat. When I bring in Shabbat early, it is not because, everyone has their own reasons, I threw out mine before, it is not because I have a suffix whether it's Shabbat now or not. That is not the reason. So therefore, when it is Shabbat for me already, I can turn to my Jewish friend who hasn't yet brought in Shabbat and 100% carte blanche, ask them to do a melacha for me, because there's no suffix about the fact that it's 100% permissible for them to do so now. And equally with, going back to the sugya as brought in the Gemara, with the case of the friend who's round the corner, keep an eye on my field, it's totally permissible for them. There's no suffix there. Therefore, if the cases can be differentiated in that way, the fact that the Torah there didn't allow, has explained that they would not be allowed to ask someone to cook for them on that Friday for Shabbat, does not in any way sort of ruin the progression that we're trying to go through here with cases like early Shabbat, etc., etc. But I'm going to stop here and ask, oh, and basically, because I promised I'd come back to it. So let's say there's something, let's keep away from it. An Eruv, just let's do it even more simply. Discussion about opening lids of bottles on Shabbat. Okay. So let's say there are some people in this room who have not heard of it, think that it's totally permissible, open all types of bottles with plastic lids, with metal lids, etc., on Shabbat. And there are other people who follow those opinions that say you may not open these lids, these caps on Shabbat. Now, if I don't open bottles on Shabbat, can I ask you to open a bottle for me? Explain why. Okay, it's because it's similar to the Torah's case of Yom Kippur, lovely, and it's less similar or not similar to the case of bringing in Shabbat early. By the way, if you specifically opened the bottle for me, can I drink what's in it then? Not based on what I said of the cooking, no. But if they deliberately served you a small bottle, placed it in front of you, opened it for you, a problem. However, if someone is going around opening bottles, you absolutely can drink from them. They are not doing it for you. It's not a specific melacha for you action. Okay, so somebody is doing it, they hold by the other opinion, it's totally permissible for them in their minds, and they are not doing it specifically for you, no problem whatsoever. And by the way, again, just to throw it out there, that's an important principle as well, again, a topic for another share, because we're very careful not to benefit from melacha done on Shabbat. That really was a melacha done on Shabbat, like neighbor next door, irreligious Jew has done melacha on Shabbat. I must be very careful not to benefit from that melacha on Shabbat. But this is different. Obviously, as you can see, there's a debate on the halachic point, each of them valid opinions. We're talking here in the multiple, numerous, a number of cases where there is a valid debate on the point. We can't be paralyzed our whole Shabbat. That is not under the definition of Maaseh Shabbat, of benefiting from a melacha that someone did on Shabbat, okay? So it's totally different, but at the same time, we may not ask specifically for them to do it for us. Okay,
When you say
apply to Eruv as you see fit.
What about corks, wine?
Not sure anyone finds a problem with that. Different. Yes.
Minus rules, like the current situation now, like saying that people who are studying Pilates decided it's becoming mitzvah, and they decided the thing now to do is not to study Pilates, to go fight, and say to their fellow brothers, like to Batuach Shav, but like that's not like, can this rule apply to that?
I think lots of rules can apply to that.
No, I'm sure it's like, the whole young becoming about the whole issue, but I'm asking if this specific rule also applies to it, like your levatel mitzvah shel limud Torah, because in my eyes, I think it's right, so I can also demand and ask you to also do that. Kind of.
I probably would say that I don't think we need to go down such complicated routes to find this comment to say. That's kind of my answer, right? We really don't need to do that, like to present an argument. But as we saw, I threw out one, you threw out another area of all legitimate, valid debates on all points of Shabbat. It will come up, and you are all correct. It's more similar to the Torah's case, not to our cases, and we can also, for the moment, put them all to one side. Now, if we return to our question of Yom Tov Sheni, so again, to repeat, especially if people on Zoom missed the question at the beginning, we have a diaspora Jew who is visiting Israel on Chag. They are keeping 2 days Yom Tov. On Yom Tov Sheni for them, when the Israeli is totally Yom Chol, may they ask the Israeli to do a melacha for their benefit? That was our question. Which scenario or scenarios does it seem most similar to in your mind from the ones we've raised?
Because the Israeli is not doing anything wrong. It's not like they are living their life as they would normally, and they are doing whatever they're doing is completely permitted.
Okay,
It's
lovely.
like the early Shabbat.
So it's like, so you find it more similar to the early Shabbat because there is no ambiguity here. The Israeli is 100%, according to 100% of opinions. I feel nervous saying that. It doesn't really happen, but I think this is valid.
If you hold stuff in Kol HaMoed, we're very lax in Kol HaMoed.
Okay, so say it was Simchat Torah. Say it was Simchat Torah. Lovely. We'll do Chol HaMoed one day. I love this. So it's the day after Yom Tov, okay? We have 100% opinions agreeing that it's 100% permissible for the Israeli to do melacha today. And therefore, think back to the reasoning of the Rashba. This Israeli this chutznik can ask the Israeli to do melacha because it's something that's totally permissible for him. The principle is as simple as that. If someone is totally permitted to do something, so go ahead and ask him to do it. So if only it were that simple. So if we apply the Rashba,
With asking a boy to do Shabbat.
it isn't, because this is what I'm saying, because there are different reasons. I might show you in one of the sources, maybe a comment that Rav Moshe, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was distinguishing between them, but there's lots of reasons to distinguish between them, okay? In all the literature, in all the halachic literature, it appears very, very straight away. It's a different scenario here.
But maybe also this Jew could have made Aliyah.
Okay. So lovely. So if we, because what if we don't accept the Rashba? I mean, you've already seen how the Rashba has been brought through and codified in the Shulchan Aruch, especially according to the Taz's understanding. Okay, but let's say we want to go back to the Ran, who said the only reason why it was okay with the field outside your tchum is because you could have made it permissible for yourself as well. Then it wouldn't apply, I'm arguing for the moment, because the diaspora Jew is sitting in my house on Yom Tov Sheni, and it's not permitted for him. There's no way that he can make melacha permitted for him today. Today is Yom Tov Sheni. It's not okay for him. No, we're not going down that tangent. We're not going. It's correct for him to keep Yom Tov Sheni, we're arguing. And he's got no way to make this any different from him. It can't be permissible for him. According to the Run, we have a problem. But you are arguing, well, he could make Aliyah, and he can decide now, I'm making Aliyah. I'm going back to get my things, but I've made Aliyah in my mind. So now it's okay for me. Do you like that reason? So Rav Moshe does not like that. He does bring it up, but he doesn't like that. We'll also see that inside in a second, hopefully.
Yes, we come here and all of a sudden I said, they only have to keep one day.
That's what I'm saying. We're not getting drawn into that, okay? Some people are told to keep 1 day. Some people are told to keep 2 days. This person was told to keep 2 days. It's correct. He's keeping 2 days. Lovely. Let's leave it at that. Otherwise, we don't have the question. Otherwise, we don't have the question. So a totally different question. Okay. Going back to what we were trying to do, we're trying to apply the principles we've got so far to our case. We think it's very simple according to the Rashba, maybe less so according to the Run. Okay, but the Rashba says as long as it's permissible, go ahead and ask him to do something. So it's permissible for the Israeli to go ahead and ask him to do it. Let us dive into, okay, ignore source 6. Okay, ignore source 6. Let's dive straight into source 7. This is Rav Moshe Feinstein. And Rav Moshe Feinstein does not like the idea of asking the Israeli to do melacha. He says the diaspora Jew should not ask the Israeli to do melacha. If they're doing things, you can benefit from it. That is different. We already showed at the beginning it's one step removed, but the asking, no. Now let's see his reasons. Because as far as we took it so far, it's perhaps difficult for us to understand. Okay, maybe we're going to change some factors at the very last moment, which isn't fair. Okay, so I've really extracted, sorry, I keep on dotting because I want you to know like I've missed out bits. Okay. The first thing he does is says, you cannot compare the case of diaspora Jew asking Israeli on Yom Tov Sheni to bringing in Shabbat early. וגם הוא, אם היה בא לא היה מקבל שבת, בכל שיש לו היתר מותר. Because he, at that case, at that situation, he could have just not brought in Shabbat, then it would have been permissible for him. So this is a period of time where he chose to keep Shabbat, but he didn't have to, so it could be permissible for him. And therefore he's allowed to ask someone else, which is not the case in our scenario. What is he doing? He's going back to the reasoning of the Run. He's going back to the reasoning of the Run. He's saying, even though you think they're so similar, Yom Tov Sheni compared to early Shabbos scenarios, even though they're so similar, but they're not similar if you employ the logic of the Run, it could have been permissible for you, because that I can only use in the case of early Shabbat, and I can't use here. Then he says, later on, shetzarich ben chutz la'aretz la'asot. Okay. So now I want to explain what he's doing. We've spoken about the fact that and I didn't bring it here, but your exact point. Okay, sorry, I have to remember even what I brought, what I didn't bring. It's just a very long Shabbat. And then he goes on to say, well, actually, maybe you can say, but he decides to make Aliyah. So there is a way to make it permissible, never close all doors. And then he says, no, not accepting that argument. I'm flagging it up, but I'm not accepting it. You can't compare. On a whim, I decide to make Shabbat early one Friday, and I'm deciding to make Aliyah. I need to talk to the wife. I need to ask lots of people. I need to sort out my parnasa. Nobody stands there on Yom Tov Sheni and in the click of her fingers decides to make Aliyah, so that's not valid. Okay. I agree. I agree. Certain people make decisions on a whim, but Rav Moshe doesn't accept it as a good enough halachic argument.
You're thinking about it and you're inspired, or there's an event that a catalyst, a trigger.
Absolutely, you can have a catalyst in one moment. I agree.
Like the second Seder.
Yeah. That just did it for me. So then he goes on to discuss the following point. He discusses why diaspora Jews are keeping Yom Tov Sheni. This is where it's a bit unfair because I'm like changing the factors at the very end. We have discussed the fact, and it was originally to do with Sfeika Diyoma. We don't know which day, or we didn't know which day, but we have now fixed the calendar, so we do know which day. So therefore, why are we keeping, diaspora Jews, keeping Yom Tov Sheni nowadays? Because of Minhag Avotenu. Now, Minhag Avotenu, he says, is a totally different reason from Sveka Diyama. We can all accept that. However, it's really, really interesting what he does with it. He says, because the reason that the diaspora Jews are keeping Yom Tov Sheni, so this day, when he's in the Israeli's house, he can't do Melacha. The reason that it's Minhag Avotenu actually makes it more stringent for him. What does he mean? How does he argue this? Let's read, okay, from where I was in the middle of source 7. Shetarech ben chutz la'aretz la'asot Yom Tov Sheni gam kshehu nimtza ba'eretz Yisrael. This diaspora Jew has to keep the second day of Yom Tov, even now that he's in Eretz Yisrael, harehu rak medin minhag, only because of the idea of minhag avotenu. Na'aseh mimela chumra. Actually, I want to show you, he says, is actually only making matters worse for him. It's making matters more stringent for him than in the days when it had been because of Sveka Diyoma. And he goes on to say, basically, in those days, would a diaspora Jew have been here at the time? Which again was never happening. No one was moving around like that. But if he would have been here at the time for a short visit, he would have kept one day because he's in Eretz Yisrael. The messages have got round, so he knows what day Yom Tov is. But now that it's because of minhag, sarich linhag b'minhago d'chutz la'aretz la'asot Yom Tov Sheni. He needs to keep his minhagim even when he's in Eretz Yisrael to keep the second day Yom Tov. And therefore, think about it, on Yom Tov Sheni, when he's in England, America, wherever he is, he can't speak Amir al Nochri. He can't ask the Nochri to do a melacha for him. So likewise here, he can't ask a non-Jew or a Jew, who are equal in this situation, because it's okay for the Israeli and it's okay for a non-Jew to do melacha today. He can't ask anyone to do melacha for him. He's got to keep his minhagim. And then he says, Lo shayach lahakel shehu be'eretz Yisrael, lo mar li Yisrael shehu ben Eretz Yisrael. Don't say, oh, okay, but maybe you should be makel and should be more lenient. And he can ask an Israeli when he's in Israel to do melacha for him. That's not as stringent as asking a non-Jew to do melacha for me when I'm in England on Yom Tov Sheni. He says, no, listen, I'll accept, even though there's no custom of asking a Jew to do melacha for you in Chutz La'aretz, well, obviously it's not an established minhag because there's no mitziut kazeh. You obviously do not have this reality in Chutz La'aretz. You're all together. Forget the Israelis who go there. You're all together. Really, forget them for a second. I know it's in your mind. You're all keeping Yom Tov Sheni wherever you are, England, wherever. And therefore, you never would have the question to ask a Jew to do something for you. Therefore, it's not your minhag, so you cannot do it here. Very, 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 very interesting what he does with it. This is not his only reason. As I said, he also is applying the Run's reasoning and saying that it's not the same as early Shabbat. But what is so interesting, and he says you shouldn't ask the Israeli to do melacha for you. What is so interesting is that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes an answer on the same question. Interesting how different people say he said different things. I have read it. He seems to be giving many reasons why it is okay to ask someone to do a melacha for you on Yom Tov Sheni, an Israeli to do. Okay, other people paint it as he doesn't encourage it, but he's trying to like limud zchut. He's trying to find, since many people do so, he's trying to find justifications for doing so. He's not trying to encourage it, and he thinks one shouldn't do it. Okay, either way, what he does with minhag, which is possibly not what I've brought here, it's not even the extract that I brought here. What he does with minhag is very, very interesting. He also says the same thing. He says, this Jew who's keeping second day Yom Tov today is not keeping it because of Sveka Diyoma. Sveka Diyoma's disappeared. He's keeping it because of minhag avotenu. But to him, that allows it to be more lenient. He says, if it was Sveka Diyoma, it would be like the Torah and Yom Kippur all over again. 1 second, there's a Sveka Diyoma. Although it's not the same as the Torah and Yom Kippur, because in Eretz Yisrael, there's no Sveka Diyoma in the same way, but it becomes more similar to a stringent line of reasoning. If it's minhag avotenu, Rav Shlomo Zalman argues, okay, so it's my minhag. As a diaspora Jew, it's my minhag to keep Yom Tov Sheni. This is what has been established, minhag avotenu. However, we know that the Israeli doesn't have that minhag. It's 100% clear to everybody, both the Israeli and the chutznik, that that is not his minhag. He has it's totally Yom Chol for him. And therefore, if the reason why you're in his house keeping Yom Tov is because of your minhag, you keep your minhag, but you know that that's not minhag. His minhag is 100% permissible for him, and therefore you may ask him to do a melacha for you. I found it very interesting that they were both talking about no sveka diyoma anymore, minhag avotenu, which is correct, and they took it in totally different directions. I will just read to you Minchat Shlomo, the little extract that I brought here, 1 second, and then I'm going to ask you. At the end, he's comparing it again to bringing in Shabbat early. What does he say? When you brought in Shabbat early, why is it so easy? Because you know that lots of places and lots of people haven't yet accepted Shabbat. Therefore, you can ask a non-Jew or even a Jew, okay? It's so extracted, I can't explain why we're talking about non-Jews here. Okay, so you're allowed to ask someone to do melacha for you because they didn't make the gezerah about not being able to ask someone to do melacha for you on Shabbos or Yom Tov unless it was equally applicable to all Jews. The same here, not just on Erev Shabbat, the same here. The same here, you are the guest. You cannot do melacha, but all the people wandering around you, all the Israelis have a totally different reality. They can do melacha, and therefore it's exactly the same scenario. You can go ahead and ask them to do melacha.
Serious, minhag avotenu is so important. Even when you move to Israel, those 2 days.
Yeah.
When you've made aliyah, no, because the minhag is on the place. The minhag is on the place. Then you're going to say, well, he's now in Israel. And that is the argument of some people. But the minhag is on the place or the place that you belong to. He doesn't belong here when he's here for a 2-week holiday. Just to finish with the other side is, for example, Rav Ovadia in Chazon Ovadia, Allah thought, Ben chutz la'aretz, the chutznik, she'ala la'eretz Yisrael v'da'ato lachzor, ignore the word she'ala, right? He's come to Israel intending to return. Mutar lomar leben Eretz Yisrael la'asok lemelacha b'yom tov sheni shel galuyot v'chen minhag. He's allowed to ask the Israeli to do melacha for him, and so is our custom. And in his footnotes, he gave the whole shir, basically, which I hadn't read before, actually. I'd read it after most of my preparation. He goes through exactly what we did. The Gemara and the Rashba and the Ran, etc. Interestingly, he somehow even finds in Rav Moshe Feinstein reasons to allow it. Again, it's really fascinating. Like, I really couldn't see where he was coming from, but I really do trust Rav Ovadia. He presented it as the vast majority of poskim allow a non-Israeli to ask an Israeli to do melacha for them. Either way, definitely a debate, definitely who to rely on. Have a good week.
I want to ask you something.
I'm just going to end this. Cool.